Welcome to Human Rights Education Now, a podcast series from Human Rights Educators USA. I'm your host, Bill Fernikes, a member of the National Steering Committee of HRE USA, a collaborative network to learn, teach, organize, advocate, and innovate for human rights education in the United States. This podcast aims to raise awareness about human rights education and invites listeners to engage with the worldwide movement to make human rights education a core focus of educational programs from preschool through higher education and in both non-formal and informal community educational settings. It has been my great honor to serve as host for Human Rights Education Now since its debut in 2023. Our team has done a superb job in preparing each and every episode for publication, with a commitment to excellence and dedication to the values upheld by HRE USA. And my gratitude for their outstanding service cannot be overstated. But now it is time to pass the torch to a new host, and I'm very pleased to announce that Yvonne Vissing, a member of our HRE USA Steering Committee, as well as a regional representative from New England, and a professor at Salem State University, will be the new host. She is the founder of their Center for Childhood and Youth Studies at Salem State and is the director of the Initiative for Civility and Everyday Life with the World as It Could Be, a nonprofit organization. Yvonne will be taking over as host of this podcast beginning in July 2026. She's a longtime human rights advocate and scholar and brings both expertise and enthusiasm to this podcast. We've accomplished a great deal over the past 3+ years, and I know Yvonne will do a superb job going forward. Thank you for listening and supporting Human Rights Education Now. Today's program is a conversation between Bill Fernikes and Dr. Yvonne Vissing with Pedro Gonzalez, Assistant Professor of Human Rights in the Departments of Criminology and Criminal Justice and Comparative Cultural Studies at Northern Arizona University. Pedro is also winner of the 2025 Ed O'Brien Award from Human Rights Educators USA. In today's episode, Pedro discusses the origins of his interest in human rights and human rights education, how his graduate study of ethics and Latin American history has influenced his human rights work, how he integrates his work on human rights issues into his teaching and scholarship, the genesis of his work on disappearances, and how he uses multimedia presentations to inform the public about this and other human rights issues, the importance of remembrance and memorials in advancing human rights education, how he addresses current federal policies in the United States dealing with migration and the real-world impacts of those policies in the United States and Central America, pressing challenges to human rights in the U.S. and Mexico, influential role models for his work in human rights, a key quote that summarizes his view of the importance of human rights, and his strategic recommendation for advancing human rights education in the United States. Well, it's a great pleasure to speak today with Pedro Gonzalez, and my good colleague from HRE USA, Yvonne Vissing, has joined us. How are you today, Pedro?
I'm doing just fine, thank you.
So, Pedro, you're a recent winner of the prestigious O'Brien Award from HRE USA, and you've done an enormous amount of good work in your career with dealing with human rights education. So we'd like to explore that today. Why don't you tell us first how you became interested in human rights education and in human rights issues particularly?
Well, that is a really good question that requires a long explanation, so I'm going to try my best to be concise. When I was thinking about the Mexican modernist, apropos of this interview, I remember that they, at the turn of the century, in early 20th century, used to think about the city, Mexico City, in terms of another character in their work in novels. So I was born in Mexico City, and when I was a kid, the city was exactly that, another character, a really complex, fascinating character. But by the same token, that proximity also gave me access to stories and to somehow the opportunity of knowing and feeling something called resonant violence, right? Which is like something effective that remains in our society after violent acts occur and leave scars or wounds. So, to be precise, when I was a kid, and these are just some examples, one day my dad came back from work. He used to work at the National University, and he told us that they were on a strike and the police came to repress them and they had to flee. So the image of my dad and his friends fleeing, escaping police in the place that to us was like sacred, right? Because I used to spend a lot of time with him at the university, was really disturbing. Then, in another occasion, we traveled to Mexico City downtown to get some electrical parts. And I remember that the cab driver was telling us how he was illegally detained and taken to a jail, a very famous jail in Mexico City, and he was tortured. And that like opened my eyes at a very early age. And then being already, like conscious of the situation, right, uh, um, gave me a new perspective. And if you fast forward maybe like 20 years, I was working for the Mexican government, and I went through some kind of a training. And luckily, they had a human rights class in that training. And that was my first approach to a formal human rights class. And that kind of complemented everything because those memories from my childhood became not clearer, but I had a bigger sense of what I was dealing with and facing. So that class, to be specific, allowed me to know that for some people, human rights were an obstacle. Namely, the police saying that they couldn't do their work because human rights were a barrier between them and their duty. And on the other hand, citizens saying human rights are an excuse for criminals to run free because they cannot be touched by police. So all that combination of ideas and experience uh, made me really curious about human rights. And then I returned to academia once I was settled here in the United States because I changed residency. And once I was in academia, I met a fantastic professor and mentor, and he changed my perspective on human rights because he practiced human rights from the education field. So that's how I got my first encounter with human rights as an experience, and then as theory, and then at the end as something that I could really practice and somehow promote and encourage.
Well, that's fascinating. You mentioned the Mexican modernists like Orozco and Rivera and Siqueiros and others. How did you feel their art reflected this idea of ambivalence between rights and then, you might say, violent response?
Mhm. Well, the painters that you mentioned are famous post-revolutionary artists who um, work on the depiction of the national identity, if you will. So what they do really good is to present a proposal in which Mexican ethnias and social classes coexist, right? And there is a certain type of criticism all the time against the elites, oppression, colonialism, etc., right? So I think the message has been basically taken by some political discourses, right? Trying to fortify the Mexican national identity, but at the same time, they are critical of those moments of oppression, discrimination, and violation of rights. So they have like a multi-directional value, if you will, and purpose.
Now, you had graduate study that focused on human rights, but then in your doctoral program, you looked at the history of ideas, focus on Latin American history and ethics. How do those fields of study inform your current work?
I think that Latin American history is full. It has plenty of examples of how things such as colonialism, exploitation, discrimination can be present in societies and produce this very deep damage and harm. So it's not only that Latin American history has this type of example, it also contains examples of resistance, of people who made proposals to change things, proposals of liberation. We have multiple examples of people coming together to change regimes, to defend human rights, to fortify civil society. So I think knowing Latin American history can provide a human rights educator with a good and vast set of examples of what can be really harmful and also very good. And ethics, because I just think that at the base of human rights, we need to consider ethics right there at the foundation, right? As an ethical responsibility towards the other, right? Or alterity, if you will.
To focus on giving everyone human dignity, would you agree?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And it is a very simple phrase, right? But it's difficult to take into practice and to exercise, right? Because there's a lot of factors intervening in the prevention of treating everyone with dignity.
Yvonne, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I had muted. This intersects with a question we wondered about how you were able to prioritize human rights education in your teaching at the university.
Mhm. My teaching is always influenced by this desire of informing my students about human rights. And sometimes it can be difficult. Sometimes it can be really challenging, right? But it's at the top of my priorities. Every class that I teach, I would consider it a human rights class. Whether I'm talking about the Mexican Revolution, dictatorships in Latin America, cases of genocide, atrocity, etc. It's a human rights class because I get the opportunity to talk and introduce topics in human rights. Also, the praxis, if you will, requires students to be in touch with not only the theory and the abstract part of human rights, but also to engage in relationship with other students and their communities. So the priority is always to create that relationship between topics, between students, between different cultures, but finding areas in common to realize that they are a lot bigger and more important than what makes us different. So in my classes, I have that hands-on approach, even if it's history, even if we're talking about really abstract, concepts and topics of the sort.
I think that's fascinating. Can you speak a little more about what you think higher education could be doing to better incorporate human rights education? Because you're doing a great job doing it with your classes, but as a university level question, what could higher ed be doing better?
Oh, thank you. I think we should consider human rights as part of a culture and somehow career readiness that we need to teach our students in order to be more conscious citizens. Usually we think about human rights in terms of the law, especially international law, and depending on our position in society or nationality, we have a different impression or idea of what human rights are. And that is normal. And I understand why some people, think that way. But I think that there's a huge need for our college communities to think about human rights in terms of a culture, something that is not specialized well, something that is not only the matter of experts, but something that is a tool and integral part of a character forming discipline that we should have at early stages in life, not only in college. So I think that that's what is missing to have a human rights component in different areas and fields, not only in the humanities, not only social science, not only law, etc.
I think we at HRE USA would entirely agree with you.
Pedro, you've done a great deal of work on the topic of disappearances, and you've not only talked about it with academic groups and written academic papers and essays, but you've actually curated a photo exhibit. How does the use of photography inform your work on human rights, and what is the impact you've seen on people who attend the exhibits?
Oh, that is a question that requires a answer that somehow is going to lead me to philosophy, because I think that photographies are somehow, as Walter Benjamin used to say, dialectical images, right? So they are like windows to history. They connect the present moment with a past that is portraying a moment in existence that is really painful for some, and that is still alive, if is the case of surviving victims. You are referring especially to the exhibit on disappearances, forced disappearances in Mexico. And I have to say that those pictures are not graphic as we would, imagine. They are just the images of mothers holding the portraits of missing children. They are really dramatic because, like I said, they allow the viewer to connect with those mothers. In this case, context is really important because we not only show the pictures of these mothers, we provide context, which becomes the narrative of this absence. We need to remember that a disappearance is a attempt to to erase in a existential level a person, right? So you attempt to erase not only the physical body, but the history, the stories, the deeds, the aspirations, the dreams of a person. And then after the disappearance, there's a second attempt to disappear these people, especially by the state and authorities who do not engage in any kind of investigation or attempt to find them, right? So showing these pictures certainly goes beyond the aspect in communication that tell us that there's a sender and a receiver, and you're just sending a message to be codified or decodified, etc. Watching these pictures allows for the creation of a relationship between people. And language here, as I was mentioning, this narrative creates a bridge beyond just informing and communicating, the details of the event. So when I see people looking at these pictures, I see true connection. They go through a moment of catharsis, if you will. They feel really connected and sad, and they feel the pain of those victims who are alive and who are still working, trying to find their disappeared ones in Mexico.
And it seems like you're following up on an earlier effort that was done in Argentina, right? In the late 70s with the Madres de Plaza de Mayo. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, that is part of my classes, and certainly is it's like the angular stone in terms of talking about disappearances, because sadly that dictatorship set the I don't know how to say this, like the normativity to consider who's going to be disappearing, who's not, right? So conceptually, it gave birth to this terminology by attempting to eliminate around 30,000 people, right? So it's a connection between reality and theory that is important for the field, but also that develops its own memory and mechanisms by people to remember and to resist. So yes, I include that in my classes and studies, because it's just really important.
Well, I'd like to follow up on this notion. At the beginning, you talked about when you were a little boy, how you were influenced by your father taking you to university, and those early childhood experiences and memories maybe lay dormant for a while until you became older, and then you saw the connection. Would you talk some more about this important work that you're doing on remembrances and memories, and how you incorporate that into your human rights education in your classes and also in the public spaces?
Mhm. Well, I think not every act of not every act of resistance needs to be really violent, right? Or in the style of a demonstration, in the style of a protest. I think that memory is also a way of showing resistance. And it's important, especially in the cases of human rights abuses, because we tend to forget. Some people say that history repeats itself, but I'm totally against that notion. It's oblivion that causes us to stumble with the same stone time after time, right? So memory is one of the pillars of justice in the case of this type of abuse. We need to remember not only to keep alive those who were victims, but to be aware that those dangers are not gone and they can be affecting somebody around the world. Especially when you deal with authorities or states who are not conscious of this, or who are maybe totally opposed to remembering because there is some kind of involvement, right? So when we see states or governments trying to erase memory, is because there's some kind of implication, and that dismantles our effort to keep the historical record alive and well. So memory, I think, is really important, especially because that's the part of us. It's not a part; it's the action that the civil society can engage with in order to make the biggest contribution to a community or a country. I guess I'm really aware that not everybody's vote or everybody's political opinion is going to be able to change a lot, but certainly engaging in any kind of protective action of memory will have good effects, whether it's at the community level, state level, etc.
And so this is part of where your love of the photography comes from, because by looking at the pictures, it makes us remember. And as you pointed out early, or it makes us see the past as part of our present, and makes us relate to that experience as if it was real for us here and now.
Yes, yes, because those pictures are also a testimony. And when we hear testimony, we become witnesses. And when we become witnesses, there's no turning, there's no looking away from that tragedy. It should be the other way around, right? After engaging with people who have gone through this type of catastrophe, right? In the case of disappearances, or I don't know, a genocide, or something like that, right? So the creation of empathy and the acknowledgement of that responsibility that we all have, right? That is not an option. Is very important in this type of work, using images.
And do you believe that the memory of what people see at your exhibit will fade unless you constantly remind them? And the reason I'm bringing this up is that there's an effort in this country, in the United States right now, to fortify a narrow narrative about the history of this country by excluding things. So do you believe that the memory must be reinforced constantly?
Yes, and as an example, I can cite, the ways in which, let's say, Native Americans of indigenous people in Latin America or around the world preserve their history, right? Which is through oral means and telling stories. Now, that would be considered problematic by, some scholars in the very own discipline of history. But I think there's a great value in the preservation of this type of a testimony, because it's not going to let us forget, and it's going to invite us to remember and empathize with those who were not lucky enough to be alive today, right? And to enjoy some rights as we do today. So yes, we need to be really careful and be protective of those materials, whether they are photographs, films, recorded testimonies, books, all kinds of records. So they cannot be dismissed as paradoxically as mythical events, right? Well, there's a difference, right, between what we nowadays know as mythology and a story or the myths that were huge for other civilizations, right? These myths and stories carry truth and carry knowledge. So that's what I'm talking about. We need to be aware of that and be protective.
Well, that builds upon an interesting comment that we had in the last episode that was published with Misha Gerakoulis, who wrote a book about the destruction of cultural heritage. Because it's not only the oral tradition, right? It's also the built environment. And the destruction of cultural heritage is a serious human rights issue.
It is, definitely. It is, because you are trying to override the effort and the knowledge of some other human group. So being respectful and aware of the value in I don't know, let's say epistemological terms, is a must to avoid human rights violations in that plane.
Go ahead, Yvonne.
Oh, yes. We were thinking a lot about the threats that the U.S. is experiencing right now with human rights on the streets, in our communities, in our homes, and certainly in the classroom. Can you talk more about the intersection of what you're doing and the larger issues in the U.S. right now?
Yes, of course. I think that what we are seeing is a very large and overwhelming process that can dehumanize people. So we know that when we start dehumanizing people, we're going to see some kind of a violence, right? That force that acts in the absence of ethics and that is really harmful. That force can attach labels to human beings. That force can categorize them, and if that narrative and discourse categorize some human beings as dangerous or as a burden to society, etc., of course, people are going to be very concerned and divided and polarized, right? So what I do attempts to humanize those who are the target of this type of speech. This is also dangerous because if not done carefully, other attempts can also disembody the history, if you will, that we carry in material terms, talking about the body and cultural heritage and all that kind of thing. So we need to be aware of this process of dehumanization. And what I do in the classroom is to make connections between the local experiences and global experiences, just to inspire others to think about others as just as human beings. It is very simple, even though it's very, very hard to do, right? Human beings who have aspirations, who have, of course, an ideology, who have goals in life. So acknowledging that can create a different perspective.
Can we dig a little deeper into that? Because of the devastating policies that are being implemented by the federal government right now regarding migration.
Mm-hmm.
How do you approach that with your students, and do you bring that local issue directly into your discourse?
Yes, precisely. I'm teaching a class on immigration and human rights. So the class is not designed to be pro-immigration. Before anything, I advocate for the right of people to not leave their country, to not leave their communities, right? Because what we see when we talk to immigrants anywhere is that they really miss their homes, they miss their towns, they miss their language, right? So very few people decide to immigrate just because they have the option, right? Most people are forced to move for multiple reasons. So my approach here is to teach, number one, that on the other hand, and historically, what we do as humans is to change residency, right? People move, people go live and discover other places, right? So that's something that we do naturally. But also, and especially in modern times, we do it because of a number of factors, namely politics, uh, armed struggle, the economy, etc. Right? So we are somehow forced to live. So what I do is a study of how those movements work, how the economy sometimes displaces people, how the decisions that we make in one country are going to negatively affect others. And it doesn't have to be immediate, right? I mean, in my classes, I talk about things that we did uh, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and still they have an effect on immigration, right? Because they changed the politics at a local level, because they transformed the economy at a global level, because they are changing the environment, and some people cannot stay in their homes, right, in their communities. So after a careful analysis of what it means to be a member of a nation, a country, a state, after a careful analysis of what it means to be dealing with exterior forces such as, geopolitics and the economy, then we go to see what is it to be an immigrant, and who's an immigrant, and why they move, and why they cross borders, right? After that, the message is different, right? For them, for my students, they see that those people are just not making a extreme and exclusive personal decision to risk their lives and come to a different country that sometimes is going to be hostile to them. Is more than that. Then the second part of the course is about showing the cultural implications of this, right? The cultural enrichment of the host society, the way in which personally immigrants change, right? Because they adapt to the new society, how they have an influence in their countries of origin, how they have an influence in their new country. So once you take a look at the non-politicized but holistic perspective of immigration, things feel a lot better, if you will, right? Because you understand that this is just people doing what we do most of the time. We just want to stay alive, live with dignity, have some rights, and provide for our families. Uh, and sometimes that implies, doing things that are gonna make other people very uncomfortable, right? Namely, the citizens of the receiving country, lawmakers, etc. Right? But that should be a separate discourse, right? I mean, the origins, the motives of immigration is what matters here. Why people do it. Once we understand that, we can feel different. We can process this information in a different way, I think.
Well,
Well,
what you're
as a
bringing up,
human, oh,
let me just pursue one thing. What you're bringing up, I think, is the idea that this has been a centuries long process. Goes back millennia, actually. Migration, human migration is essential, right? It's been a natural process for a long time. And the idea of borders are actually artificial, that borders are constructed rather than being natural. There's no political border between the US and Mexico that was there from millennia, right? It was created. So, I mean, people don't often think about that.
Yes, and that is the point of teaching what is a nation, what is a country, how the state works, and especially how the nation state works, right? Because that's a required aspect in modernity. And we see that that can be also really violent and genocidal. We have multiple examples in which the overwhelming power of this idea develops animosity between groups, right? And some people are deemed not worthy of being part of the body politic. And that's when we see either displacement, genocide, and other human rights violations. So we need to be aware of that, of how this difference among human groups is not necessarily something bad, right? It's not necessarily something that we can address from a perspective of hierarchy. Difference should be appreciated as something that is very, very good, but without the hierarchy. And borders usually tend to do that, right? Like draw a line on the sand saying you are very different and your worth or values are very different and you should not be here. So we face a different set of problems when we deal with those artificial political lines on the ground.
Yvonne, go ahead.
as a professor with a human rights emphasis in your classes, you are challenged, right? Because we have challenges on publications, on what we can research, on what we can say in class. And then we have our students who are coming to us, who, as you say, are being marginalized, maybe discriminated against, maybe having a variety of oppression, trying to vote, deciding whether to protest or not. How to access resources, where to stay, where to go. So how do you as a professor handle those kind of challenges? Because it's not just a concept at that point. We are, as professors, are on the line too.
Yes, that is sometimes frustrating. But what I say all the time to my students is something that I read in a book by John Roth, and I think it's called The Problems of Ethics. Oh, when ethics fail. I'm sorry, I need to double check that title. But the argument is that we're always going to live in thing that he describes as the eye of the hurricane, right? There's going to be some kind of a danger surrounding us, right, in terms of human rights violations. And our job is to keep everybody in that middle point where they are safe and aware, right, and don't engage in the reproduction of that type of violence. I say this is very frustrating because when students face reality and face the news and face the actions by authorities or other citizens who dismiss human rights and abuse them, to say something like "you need to stay firm, you need to stay focused" is just like it sounds a little bit fantastic, right? Like this is like fiction. But what I'd say is that human rights and ethics, for that matter, should be like a compass indicating the way. We may not arrive into that utopic society in which everybody enjoys those rights, but we need to be walking towards that horizon all the time. So by not losing hope, I think we are doing a lot by not giving up, by not engaging in the same discourses, in the same easy answers to very complex issues. So that's what I try to share with them. There's a lot of disappointment, and this is not about some kind of a toxic optimism. Just saying like, okay, this is gonna be over. It's gonna change soon. It may not be the case, right? But we need to stay faithful to our beliefs and into the human rights normativity, right? And in the spirit of human rights. And by faith, I mean something else, right? I was going to explain that later, but that's what I do.
You could explain it now.
Okay. Well, faith in this case is a word that can be associated with only religious beliefs, right? The existence of God or deities. But for me, from a philosophical perspective, and thinking of Emmanuel Levinas, faith is believing that love without reward is valuable. So giving love without expecting a reward or salvation would be something essential for those who are involved in the field of human rights. And by love, I don't mean that we're going to be, in perfect harmony holding hands. By love, I mean that we are assuming the responsibility of taking care of other people and other people's rights, at least respecting them, right? So again, this can sound like a utopia, but it's just like a moral compass, if you will, right? It's just guiding the way, like following a star.
You are, I think, very well situated to talk about what you see as the most pressing human rights challenges in Mexico and the US because you grew up in Mexico and now you live in the United States. If you had to say there were one or two that are the most prominent issues that two countries should face in terms of human rights, what might they be?
I think that the situations in the US and Mexico are different for multiple reasons. But what I see in common is that there's a tendency to follow very dangerous ideologies that promise, like I said, simple answers to very difficult questions. And that can be very abstract and generalizing, but by that I mean that sometimes it's better for people just to turn around and find a compact or a very simple answer to something that is just very complex. And whether that is questions of, I don't know, gender, politics, culture, nationality, etc. Right? So I would say that is a huge problem, especially now because we have means of communicating that are almost instant and that can allow communication between people who are in different parts of the world. So that was going to be some kind of a panacea and was going to solve a lot of problems and get us together is at some point tearing us apart. And I'm not saying that this technology or these platforms are bad per se, because they can be very powerful tools for education and for communication. And right now we are using it for that purpose. But when they are used in a different type of spirit, especially for profit, they can be really, really dangerous. And I think we're seeing the consequences of the use of that type of platform for the distribution of ideas that divide and that dehumanize, especially.
Couldn't agree more on that. Well, we're going to turn to our last few questions. I'm going to start off. Who would be the most influential role model for your work in human rights?
There has been several people, but I have to say that the most influential and the one who gave me the points of reference for what I wanted to do in life is Dr. Rick Halprin. He teaches at SMU. When I met him, all those stories that I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation made sense in terms of theory, history, and purpose, personal purpose. Because I knew that I needed to go back to academia. I knew that I needed to continue my professional career at a university. I just didn't know how. And when I met him, I knew that I just want to do what he was doing, to teach human rights topics, to make connections between people, to teach people about other events around the world that were not good for humanity. So in order to prevent them, right? In order to create awareness. So definitely Dr. Halprin.
Well, that's nice
Now,
to know. I mean, I've known Rick for almost 40 years now, and there's no question he is a giant in this field. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Yeah.
well, I wondered if you had a quote that summed up your view of the importance of human rights or human rights education.
That would be the one on faith, which is by Emmanuel Levinas, which is believing that love without reward is valuable, which implies a responsibility towards the other, regardless of how you feel. If you're gonna get any kind of salvation or anything, it should be a responsibility.
Thank you.
It's interesting you mentioned Levinas. He has had a lot of influence in the study of the Holocaust in particular through his work.
Yes. It was probably a response, right, to the Holocaust and the philosophical views that, according to him, allowed this type of behavior and catastrophe. So, yes.
Right. So to conclude, if you had the power to make one critical change in the United States or worldwide to advance the rights of human beings, what would you recommend?
I think I would somehow attempt to decolonize their existence. And by that, I mean that I would try to free people from toxic technology, oppressive education, things like violent parenthood, wild consumerism, unethical marketing, things like that, right? I think that plants a seed that somehow can thrive and be really harmful. So I would try to have new perspectives on how we should coexist and exist, because sometimes this is not the only way. That the way that we know is not the only way of being. There's gotta be otherwise than being, right? It's gotta be another opportunity for humanity to to look at ourselves in a different way. When I talk to students and even colleagues, there's this conversation about how evil human beings are, and how, we don't have any kind of hope, and how, twisted we are, and all these type of negative aspects, right? But on the other hand, we see people who rescue others, right? Such as the people who were rescuing people during the Holocaust. We see the righteous among the nations. We see that even in our regular families, we keep our kids for like 18, 20 years, right? And we provide and we take care of them, right? So there's a lot of examples that I can cite in which cooperation and collaboration are a lot stronger than that evil spirit that most people like to cite. I know it's overwhelming, and I know it's a real problem, but just like in the case of, the searching mothers, those who you can see in the exhibit that I'm promoting, how can we explain that? How can we explain that love, that engagement? How can we process the fact that these mothers are still looking for their children when the government, when the state, and when criminal organizations had been threatening them and perhaps saying to some of them that if they continue, they are going to get killed, right? So that's what I'm talking about, that kind of a relationship that is really strong among human beings. I think if we pay more attention to that type of coexistence, things can change very slowly, but that would be the spirit of what I do. Try to emphasize that yes, we are capable of that very bad and evil behavior, but we are also capable of rescuing, of giving our best and creating those relationships that provide dignity to other human beings.
Well, Pedro, that was a wonderful way to close the conversation today.
Well, thank you.
And we thank you very much. Yvonne, do you want to add anything?
I want to thank you for your work. We all have our own challenges, and where you are located and with the gifts that you bring from your history, it's a really important thing that you do. And I just want to make sure that, we all are grateful to you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here with you, talking with you, and it has been an honor to receive the Human Rights Education Award.
Okay, Pedro, thank you very much, and we wish you the best. Thanks for listening to Human Rights Education Now. You can find additional information about this podcast series at www.hreusa.org. Each episode is available on the HRE USA podcast page, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Pocket Casts, Player FM, and Deezer. You can also download each episode as an MP3 file. If you have questions or comments about this podcast, send them to Christy at hreusa.org. That's KRISTI at hreusa.org. Our podcast team includes producer and editor Bill Fernikes, executive producer Christy Redelius Palmer, editor Elizabeth Schwab, sound designer and project manager Sabrina Sanchez, communications and public outreach coordinator Tina Hinz, and production coordinator Jasmine Chizu Gota. Human Rights Education Now is a production of Human Rights Educators USA, a project of the Center for Transformative Action in Ithaca, New York.